Do you ever find yourself getting upset really easily, getting triggered, and you go in these emotional fits of rage, or you find yourself crying and being really upset and sad about something you just don't know? You just go into these mood swings. And then you also walk around in life with this sense of you're just watching yourself live, but never fully being present. This is Dr. Spencer Coaches. Today I'm going to talk to you about complex post-traumatic stress disorder because I believe this is the most misunderstood behavior and personality problems that a person can have. And it has its roots in trauma. Now, the difference between complex post-traumatic stress disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder, otherwise known as PTSD, is that you have multiple incidences of trauma. With PTSD, there's one incidence of trauma. And studies show that complex post-traumatic stress disorder primarily happens during childhood. And it happens from abusive parents. You could have narcissistic parents, emotionally neglectful parents, or physically or sexually abusive parents, or one or both. And grow up in that kind of environment, even foster parents, where you're just continually getting abused, being put down, being ignored, being neglected, getting beaten up. Or, the other hard thing is sexual abuse. Now, in my experience, I was tortured when I was 4 and 5 years old, and that's why I get into this and talk about it, because for a long time, I didn't know what was going on with me. And I suffered from a lot of emotional disturbances, depression, feelings of shame and guilt, and go in these fits of rage with people getting triggered. I didn't know why. People were like, what's wrong with you? From the outside, I looked like I lived a pretty good life. My parents were well off. We lived in a middle-class neighborhood. Played on the Little League baseball team, played indoor soccer, skateboarded, did the things that kids do when you grow up. But on the inside, I was suicidal. I contemplated suicide when I was 14, 15, throughout high school, and even attempted suicide when I was 18, 19, when I lost my scholarship. And that's what prompted my healing journey. Went to a psychiatrist, got put on antidepressants, and basically an anti-anxiety medication as well, and stuff to calm me down. And that really helped me open up and just have someone to talk to in a safe space. And then I studied psychology, and that got me really into, this is a theory that explains what's happening. And the biggest thing I've learned out of studying psychology is just to learn to accept myself. Accept no matter all my faults as well as my gifts. That whoever I am, whatever I am as a human being, it's okay. Now, years later, I still had I'd get triggered basically, and get really upset over things that didn't make sense. Why would I get that upset? Disproportionately upset. I even lived with a Native American medicine woman, which really helped patch me up during my undergrad when I was studying psychology. That helped me a whole lot, but I was still having these emotional disturbances, getting triggered. I didn't know why. So I began to study more about PTSD, and that's when I discovered complex post-traumatic stress disorder. There's a book called The Body Keeps Score. I forgot the name of the author. It's some Austrian author. And also Pete Walker gets into CPTSD as well. Two great authorities, those two books. And you can look them up. And also some YouTube stuff. I did a lot of research on CPTSD and learned that when you have these multiple incidents of trauma when you're younger, your brain actually suffers from permanent changes. And what do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to give you the raw science, and then I'll explain and break it down and make it simple for you, because I think that understanding this will help you understand and have a grip and understand that there's almost no cure for this. Now, I don't want to discourage you, because it's not about finding a cure. It's about self-mastery. That's what it is for me. Because this journey has taught me so much about myself in the world, about my mind and how the mind works. And from doing that, I've gained a sense of maturity and self-understanding that even talking about it, I don't get triggered anymore. So let me dive in here. Permanent changes in the brain. The right occipital lobe, which is the visual cortex, is overstimulated. These are through MRI studies. The left parahippocampus, which is a part of the brain that is responsible for remembering people and events, is overstimulated. The amygdala, which is the flight or fight response, is enlarged. The prefrontal cortex, which is executive functioning of the brain, and also the part of the brain that's responsible for regulating your emotions, shrinks. So if you have this CPTSD, you have a hard time making executive decisions that have long-term consequences. So you tend to be impulsive. And that's what I was. I lived a very impulsive lifestyle. I made the best of it when I was young, but that getting triggered was because I was in a state of hypervigilance. Because basically your brain is replaying the event, those horrifying traumatic events over and over and over, nonstop. That's the visual memory, and that's causing your flight or fight, and there's also two other responses, the fawn or the freeze response, that's activated all the time. Your brain, your nervous system never calms down. You never calm down. And it's hard to make decisions. There's a saying, don't make a decision when you're stressed out. You're basically stressed all of the time. So your stress bucket is full. So when people lay on responsibilities, you can feel overwhelmed very easily. And how you deal with this turns into your behavior. So for me, my parents raised me to be a high performer, always pressure about getting grades. I was very competitive in skateboarding and always pushed myself to be better than who I was the other day and to be better than other people. I was really competitive. And that drove me to be able to really face a lot of fear and develop a sense of self-control as far as my athleticism went, and through skateboarding and snowboarding. And that actually enabled me to really calm my mind and activate my executive functioning, see consequences of actions to create a positive outcome, or to create the desired outcome in this case, for landing skateboarding tricks or snowboarding tricks. But for other things like my long-term life goals, I just couldn't comprehend 5-10 years down the road. And this is common between people with CPTSD, is also a sense of what's called derealization disassociation. And that's when you're kind of living your life spaced out, detached, and not really fully present, not emotionally aware, because you kind of numb yourself. And this is actually the freeze response of the nervous system. You shut down your emotions and go into analysis paralysis, and you just kind of sit there and kind of tune out. You won't really hear what people say. It's just kind of like when someone's speaking in the distance, that's what it experiences. And it's not really conducive to a successful life or fulfilling life. Relationships are, they come and go. You always find someone to trauma bond with, someone who also suffers from something that causes depression or rage or sadness or whatever, and you always bond with those people. That's what I did. In fact, that's all the girls I dated in my life, or girls with emotional problems. Because I found it comforting to be able to actually share those feelings with somebody. And it's really not the basis of a healthy relationship, because you start fighting for your emotional needs to be met. That's what I do. And it creates just such a dysfunctional relationship. But so I'm touching upon many aspects of CPTSD, both what it is neurologically, what it is behaviorally, and what it is emotionally, experientially. So I'll tie it all together here by explaining the 4 responses, because you have the fight response, the flight response, the freeze response, and the fawn response. Now, because of these responses are activated all the time, you're going to be stuck in one of these responses all your life until you learn to control it. So the fight response, everybody knows if a tiger runs in the room, you're going to either run or you're going to fight it. You'd be pretty crazy if you want to fight it. But that's the idea. Most people run from danger, which is usually the smart thing. Only when you're a child, there's nowhere to run to. You can't run away from your parents. You can't fight your parents. Hence, there's the freeze response. So you're just stuck there. You shut your feelings down and then you disassociate. And there's just, like I described earlier, just that stoic, non-responsive, there's no emotional expression, just kind of that poker face. Yeah. And you talk to people talk to you, it's like you're there, but the lights aren't on, that expression. And it's like, are you here, Earth to so-and-so, and you're not really present. And you're kind of spaced out, because who wakes up to feel anger, rage, fear, guilt, and shame? And underneath that is despair, agony, and just so much torment. There's terror. It's not a fun feeling to have, but that's the true emotional state, that helplessness, because that's what you felt when you were a child, being beaten, being abused. It's so difficult to process these emotions. Or, your parents are abusing you, and then you decide, well, I have to please them. I'm just going to do what they say, tell them what they want to hear. And that becomes a fawn response. You just learn to please them. And then your whole life, you become a people pleaser. And then you feel neglected, you feel abandoned because your needs are never met. And there's a huge amount of depression with that. And that abandonment, because your needs were abandoned, because you were abused and your need for nurturance and protection wasn't there, you had some type of adaptive behavior by reading the cues of, well, if I please them to make them happy, then the punishment, the abuse stops. And that's the idea. So these were adaptive behaviors. You adapt to the environment. It's part of being human. But as children, we don't really comprehend a whole lot about the world. We're just primarily emotional. And it's an emotional response, a reaction. And it's actually a healthy response. Is what you're supposed to do. Is we have this flight, fight, freeze, or fawn response to help us survive. It's designed to make us feel safe. And you wanted to feel safe, but you couldn't. If you're in an abusive environment, there's nowhere to run. You couldn't fight. So that's what happens. And if you do decide to fight, constantly arguing back with your parents, that leads into a personality, really narcissism. And if you take on your parents' behavior, which is what most commonly happens, you grow up and then become abusive towards your children or your spouse. Or you become a real jerk to people and you don't know why people don't want to hang out with you or don't invite you out because of your behavior. And that's what happened to me in my life. And for me, owning my behavior, besides just the processing and understanding, was really owning my behavior that really helped me change my life, becoming accountable for my behavior. Because that's what really, for me, forced me to exercise self-control. And really made me look at, well, how am I reading social cues? Like, is that person truly offensive? Why are they triggering me? Or are they actually attacking me? Or how am I coming across? How am I coming across to them, causing a response in them? I would dominate. I would act superior. I would yell, not really yell, but raise my voice and get really intense and almost scare people. My brother told me that. And he's like, you're scaring me. It's like you want to kill me or something. Like the look in your eyes and the rage that you have, the intensity. It's like, oh my God, like that's how I'm coming across. So really owning how I express myself and how I behave is what really made me self-aware that, okay, how I'm handling things isn't healthy. And that's a good place to start. Because even though I lived in a yoga center, studied with a Zen master, practiced Buddhist meditation, which helped me be able to develop what's called a witness state and be able to process my emotions rather effectively. I could feel all of these feelings and not overreact or allow it to affect my behavior anymore. And meditation has really helped me out of everything. Really process my emotions, because Buddhist meditation is in the body. You process all the sensations, feelings or sensations in the body. And for me, I learned to process the despair was the big one. The helplessness, and it was part of the abandonment, the shame, the rage and the guilt has its roots in the agony, and it's really agonizing. The rage I was able to channel into exercising and learn how to channel it into athletic things and just transmute it like that. The depression, the sadness, I learned to transform through music and expression and playing the guitar. And learning just to embrace that and love it, because love is the transformative factor here. When you love these emotions, they transform into compassion and a kindness, into generosity and a patience. And I don't want to get too into that. That's a whole nother topic of tantric practice. But, these negative emotions can be transformed. Because you weren't born this way. You weren't born feeling rage. You weren't born feeling shame. You weren't born with this sense of agony and despair. You weren't born feeling abandoned, like nobody loves you, nobody cares about you. That's what I believed growing up, that my parents didn't love me, nobody cares about me. Because when I tried to talk to my parents about what happened to me, they didn't believe me. No one believed me. So I just gave up and realized no one's going to ever deal with this, until I tried to commit suicide, and memories started to surface. And not until actually within the past year I did hypnotherapy that I remember and recall these events in my life and trace the source of the depression, the despair, the helplessness, and the agony to my time in being kidnapped and being tortured. So it's something that takes time. With PTSD, I'm 49 years old, and I started my healing journey when I was 19. So it took me 30 years just to come to this point. With PTSD, you can go to therapy and get results in 3 months. With CPTSD, it takes decades. Because of the emotional dysregulation, because of the permanent changes in the brain, that feeling of emptiness, that feeling of abandonment, that shame and despair is constant. And that's the emotional dysregulation. You see, the brain wants to come to a sense of balance, and it's called homeostasis. It's actually hardwired into our brain. We want to innately feel safe. We want to innately feel loved. And we want to innately feel confident. We want a sense of personal power. And what happens during trauma, all of that's taken from us. There's no sense of safety. There's no sense of personal power or confidence and trust in ourselves. And there's no sense of nurturance and protection. So we grow up feeling this constant emptiness, and we don't know what it is. And whether you're experiencing depression or even addictions, because I know took a lot of drugs when I was in college, and it was really about regulating my emotions and also, avoiding feeling bad feelings. This is the cause of a lot of alcoholics. You go to an AA meeting, they all talk about how their father abused them, their mother abused them, whatever the story is, there's always abuse associated with drug use, drug addiction. My father used to beat me, and my mother used to beat, whatever the story is. Or you're taking on your parents' narcissistic behavior, and then you're becoming a real jerk to people, and it's really, that's not the real you. That's not your true personality. So all of these problems arise as a result of this. Problems in relationship, problems at work, exploding at people at work, and you can't get ahead in life because of your getting triggered. So one way to approach this is through learning just to become aware of what you're feeling. Getting into your body. That's what yoga did for me. And Buddhist meditation, a specific kind called vipassana, where it's an in-body meditation, and developing emotional intelligence. Now, the other side is the brain wants to come to, a natural balance. Ultimately, you want to experience completion. And that's your brain processing these emotions. Your brain, actually, your consciousness, you're not your mind. But the mind can distort things. It interprets things to protect a point of view. And that point of view for us people with CPTSD is victimhood. And it's a really sad point of view because ultimately we human beings are very powerful. But it's easy to play victim. And the more we play victim, then we say, well, we can't control it. I can't change it. I can't help it. This is who I am. And we just create excuses and we just resign to that state of learned helplessness. When in fact, you can actually help yourself through self-mastery. Now, for me, it's really through yoga and meditation because that's what yoga is really about, self-mastery. The shamanism helped get my power back, helped get my soul fragments back. And actually, that's where we developed a witness state when we tried to recapitulate some of the memories of abuse, but we didn't get into the full memory, not until I did the hypnosis. And other people who went through similar experiences that I did asked me, how, you've actually changed a lot in the past year. Like you're much lighter, you're not angry anymore. How do you go through this hypnosis and have the memories recalled and not get triggered all over again? It was through meditation. Actually, in sitting meditation, I remember feeling this deep sense of despair, this deep sense of aloneness, this deep sense of dark emptiness. And I just sat there in this sense of terror and dread. And I remember just sitting there feeling it and just being with the sensation. It's heavy, it's thick, it moves. There's heat involved and just reducing it down to sensations. And by reducing it down to sensations rather than making a story about it, I was able to process these emotions. And even to this day, they still come up because these emotions are part of you. That's part of your brain. These shadow emotions, if you will, these really reptilian kind of feelings that we have, really infantile feelings, are part of our brain. And it's just our brain trying to understand situation and circumstance. And it's a reaction. It's a natural human reaction. The only thing is some people are more resilient when you experience a hard time. You may experience stress, some hardship, some anger, some resentment, and then get over it and learn to adapt. For us with CPTSD, our stress bucket is up to here. So any kind of added responsibility, people demanding things, asking things, remembering schedules and things, remembering responsibilities and bills, family, friendship obligations, things like that can feel overwhelming. And our stress bucket gets full, and the same emotional reaction that we had when we were a child happens all over again. So self-mastery is about gaining control of your emotions, gaining control of your thoughts. There are beliefs that can amplify these bad feelings, like nobody loves me. If I keep thinking nobody loves me, nobody cares about me, I'm going to go into a pit of despair. And if I tell myself things are never going to work out, I'm going to give up even trying. So what we tell ourselves also influences our emotions. And if we can allow our emotions to calm down, allow our thoughts to calm down, that's what Zen meditation is really about. Just letting your mind come to a state of calmness on its own without trying. You're not going to get rid of negative thinking by thinking how bad it is to think negatively. You'll just start thinking more negatively. But allowing yourself just to come to a state of stillness, just like a glass of muddy water. If you stir it, the more you stir it, the more muddy it becomes. If you just put it down and let it rest, all of the mud sinks to the bottom and the water becomes clear. Same with your mind. Now, sitting meditation is not for everybody. Having somebody to talk to helps tremendously because somebody can create a safe space and allow you to open up, and then you become conscious of what happened and what you're feeling. Being in your body, being able to name the feelings, creating a vocabulary. Anger, rage, fear, guilt, and shame are what you feel. On this, you can call it the unconscious, but you're aware of feeling those and you don't want to feel those because they're not pleasant to feel. But even at a deeper level, underneath those feelings is going to be despair, agony, helplessness, and terror. And those feelings are very difficult to feel. They're part of the reptilian brain of all these kinds of different fears that we have. And there really is nothing to fear in reality. It's just an emotional response. And by allowing ourselves to feel them, we can process them and come to a state of completion. That state of peace that you truly seek is a state of completion. And by allowing yourself to feel them, your brain will automatically process them and come to a state of peace and balance. The problem is allowing yourself to feel, because it's really scary. And being able to name the feelings is allows you to express them. And when you're able to express them, that's half the battle, because now your conscious mind, the cortex, is gaining control of the limbic brain. The cortex is the master. The limbic brain is underneath that. The cortex should be in charge. When the limbic brain becomes in charge, we become impulsive, immature, lack self-control, blow up on people, become an emotional wreck. And that's how we are, people with CPTSD. Now, the other side is turning into borderline personality disorder, which is very close to CPTSD, only CPTSD tends to not have suicidal thoughts. And the underlying emotional chassis of borderline personality disorder is a fear of abandonment. And there are suicidal thoughts. Because of the emotional dysregulation, there's often changes of identity. Every few hours or every day, you could be a different person, behaving differently. With a narcissism, the chassis is insecurity. And then there's a state of inflation, self-importance, because you're using anger. It's actually the fight response. The borderline personality disorder is the freeze response. And that frozenness goes into feeling abandoned. There's a deep sense of abandonment because your needs were not met. The narcissistic turns into, well, you're fighting. You're going to argue. You're going to fight back with your parents. And then you begin to take on and imitate their behavior because that's just an adaptive thing. This is what you're in your mind as a child. You believe this is what you need to become to survive. But now that you're an adult, you have maturity, you have experience, you have a deeper developed cognition, and you can actually have deeper comprehension of the situation. and you no longer need to behave that way. And this gives cause to change. This gives cause to grow. This gives cause to heal and move on and forgive and transform yourself into the person you were meant to be, an authentic, loving, caring, intelligent, focused human being who can actually handle things to a greater degree than the average person because you've been through hell. They haven't. You have the ability to take on so much more than you know. It's just your brain is fixated on this past, ruminating, dwelling upon all of these bad things that happen. You can't just stop dwelling on it. You actually have to dwell on it deeper to process it. It's kind of a conundrum. By allowing yourself to feel, getting out of your head, stop analyzing and just feel it. Literally just feel it without analyzing. And that's the real key to processing these emotions. So then when they come up, they don't come up as amplified, as intense. It's just a little glimmer of despair, helpless. It's really abandonment. And it's really disgust, sadness, and fear rolled into one. And when you're able to feel that, it's just a split second because cognitively you know that that's not what's happening, that you have skills now, that you can do this and that you've experienced things, and you're more mature now. And then you can go right into that wise mind. You can go into that state of having a sense of maturity and self-control and respond effectively to produce the outcome that you want, to produce whether it's negotiation, whether it's harmonious relations, whether it's coming to some sort of agreement, whether it's just learning to keep silent and not lash out at somebody. You know, that sense of self-control that you have is going to get you farther in life than lashing out at people or getting upset easily or going on these mood swings and flipping out on people and leaving for days on end. You know, that's an ineffective behavior. Or having addictions, it's just not going to get you to where you want to be. Just think of the results that you want. Now, better said, easier said than done, rather. It took me 30 years to get to this place. With CPTSD, it takes a long time, and I did multiple different types of therapy. So you find something that works for you. It could be talk therapy. It could be cognitive behavioral therapy. It could be shamanism. It could be yoga. It could be music. Many people play music. It could be martial arts. I mean, there are people practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu who swear that it saved their life, that they had these problems. And through Jiu-Jitsu, it's so physical and so actually cerebral that you learn to calm down. Otherwise, you get beat. So there's different ways to deal with this. EMDR therapy coupled with CBT, but you need to have a somatic, an in-body type of awareness, whether it's a therapy, whether it's exercise, whether it's yoga, because you need to really process the feelings inside to heal. And now if you have any more questions, I encourage you, leave a comment below and we can set up a consultation and we can talk about it. I'm a trauma-informed life coach. I'm actually a business coach, but I'm finding so many people have this because I have it. And because I've gone through it myself, I'm able to help other people go through it. Because this causes a problem in the professional world, or whether you own your own business and you're an entrepreneur, it's always trauma that keeps you from growing. It keeps you from committing. It keeps you from leading. It keeps you from making progress in life. And we weren't born to suffer. We weren't born to live in agony and despair and poverty. We were born to experience joy and love and happiness and success. And that's what life is all about. So if you want to know more, go ahead and leave a comment. This is Dr. Spencer Coaches. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.